This is from Ecclesiastes 4, verse 1. Again I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought, the dead who are already dead, more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been and not yet seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. Then I saw all toil and all skill in work come from man's envy of his neighbor. This is also vanity and is striving after wind. The fool holds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after wind. Again I saw vanity under the sun. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and deriving myself a pleasure? This is also vanity and an unhappy business. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, and has not another to pick him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him, and a 3-fold cord is not quickly broken.
All right. Do you recognize the last part of that passage? I actually used it yesterday in a wedding that I did for Alexis and Taylor, who are now married. So congratulations to them and to the family. It's a passage that often gets used in wedding ceremonies, this 2 are better than 1 passage. It's a great passage. But it's so contrasted by the first part of that, isn't it? The first part of that chapter versus the last piece of that chapter are so radically different. So I have lots of thoughts about this. And I've written down lots of thoughts about this. I don't know for sure how many of them I will all get through, but I'm going to try to work my way through the gist of it and just share with you a number of thoughts on this. All right? Does that sound fair enough? And really we're heading towards an idea of community and life together, and what makes life worth living. And part of it is living it together with each other. All right, so again, Solomon, he's in a pretty depressive sort of state when he seems to write this whole book of Ecclesiastes. He takes on the role of sort of the critic as he writes this. He raises lots of questions. He challenges lots of truth. And you see here in this passage, especially in the beginning part, that Solomon is wrestling with some painful things. He's got some issues. He's got some issues with life. He's got actually even some issues with God. And truth be told, he raises some pretty compelling points, I find. Some of the stuff he raises is really compelling. And he opens chapter 4 with a pretty dark look at things, doesn't he? It's dark. And it is so because the dark things of the world and the dark things of humanity have obviously captured Solomon's attention at this point in time. So things like suffering, injustice, betrayal, oppression. These are the things that his mind is upon right now that are leading him to these dark thoughts. Solomon sees with some pain, he sees that these are real life experiences for far too many people. That's what he's perceiving at this moment. And it's not even just that. It's like while he sees so much of this suffering and injustice and oppression and hopelessness, he also sees that there's power in this world, right? There's power in this world. And I think that one of the things he acknowledges that power could do is make things right. Right? He almost seems to be acknowledging, although he doesn't say it outrightly, that perhaps this power could make things right, but, right? Because that's what he's stuck on. It's the but. It doesn't. It doesn't. In fact, so often the powers that are in existence in this world, they're on the wrong side of that to fix it, to make it better for those who are suffering. It seems that the power of this world, it seems to help those who already have so much and are frankly quite okay, rather than helping those who are suffering and in pain and enduring great injustices. The power of the world, it just seems to protect and guard the already protected, right? The already secure, the already comfortable. And it bypasses those who need those things. The powers of this world, they seem to preserve the wealth of the wealthy. It's like that's what the power of this world seems to be spent upon, is protecting the wealth of the wealthy. It lends itself to the already powerful, and the weak and the needy and the suffering. Although it seems that the powers of this world just forsake them. Even though they could, those powers could make a difference for them. It doesn't. And this rings as somewhat meaningless in the mind of Solomon. So then Solomon takes yet another look at the toil and the work that we do in life, through life in this world. He's looked at it several times now already. The toiling under the sun. It's one of his main themes of the book, is all this work and effort that we put into life, and where does it get us? What good is it? Here he is again questioning the same thing. It's something he's already dwelt on a few times. In fact, at one point in time, he's questioned the value of it before, but at one time he even suggested in chapter 2 that we should be able to derive meaning from the work that we do under the sun. That's a place where we should find some purpose in our lives. And yet he acknowledges also that too often we don't. And the reason here he begins to identify why this working that we do in life, in the world, ends up being meaningless is because of the motive out of which we work. Right? You see that? The motive out of which we work, he finds as being too often senseless. And that motive is the motive of envy of our neighbor. We're driven out of envy of our neighbor, keeping up with our neighbor, right? We're driven to perform, to look good in front of our neighbor. And that's the part that he finds meaningless. Solomon recognizes that far too often at our core, we are prone to desire attention from our neighbor, admiration from our neighbor, and approval from our neighbor, right? You see that in our world? You see it really plainly on high school campuses, right? But my goodness, when we grow up, it's not much different. We might become a little bit more sophisticated in how we try to pursue the approval of others, but it still tends to be too often what motivates us and pushes us to try to achieve so that we can win the approval of others. Or try to buy expensive things so that we can win the approval of others or whatever. Solomon recognizes this, and he sees it as meaningless. When that is what drives us to work and to succeed and to find meaning in our work, he says it's foolish and it's futile. We basically end up, and here's what so often happens in our world, I'm sure we've all noticed this, is you basically end up being told what you should buy. But by all kinds of forces out there. Everything from our neighbor, whose grass always seems to be greener and we got to green ours up too, to various, incredible efforts by brands and designer labels to tell us what it is that we need so that we'll be happy, so that we'll look good, so that we'll be acceptable to others around us. They spend billions of dollars crafting these strategies to just get us to buy into what it is that we need or think we need in order to be happy, acceptable, win the approval of others. Not because, by the way, we really need it. And not because those things are necessarily even better than unbranded things. And certainly not because possessing those things will make us better people. They don't. They don't. But we seem to buy into this strategy that they might, because we'll win the approval of others, so we must be somehow better. Now, it simply doesn't work like that. It doesn't. And if we pursue these things simply to impress others and win the approval of others, we will then become, well, it's just an illusion, is what it is in the end, that's how we'll become more accepted and valuable and maybe establish friendships with these people who are the right people to establish friendships with. Now, and you know, I think it works. It's too easy, I think, for us to focus on the idea of it being brand name expensive things, because it's not just that. It's not just that. I mean, I don't think it matters if we spend $150 for a pair of jeans in order to impress others, or if we spend $5 for a pair of jeans at a thrift store in order to impress others. If it's done in order to impress others, it becomes that chasing after the wind. If that's the motive for the purchase and the pursuit, in the end, it's going to be a fruitless exercise. Now, I mean, it could very well be a nice thing to get something of good value at a thrift store for a really great price. You know, something that's good, solidly made, going to last long and serve you well, and score a great price at a thrift store. I mean, yeah, okay, there's some intrinsic value in doing that. But does it make you more acceptable? Should it make you more acceptable? So I'm going to tell you a story about my last purchase at a thrift store, because I like to purchase things at thrift stores. I've probably told a few of you, I know I've told a few of you already, because actually, here's the crazy thing. I was kind of proud of that purchase, which all this week I'm going, this is ringing too true for me. So how many of you have seen my Mexico bag that I used to carry my books around in? Mexico book bag. It was like a raw hide leather book bag that I bought in Mexico that I hauled my books around in for about 3 years. It was starting to get old, a little bit ratty, and frankly, it was never really quite big enough for all that I needed to haul around, because I move around and work sort of everywhere. I don't really have a stationary office. I'm in the library, I'm at Starbucks, I'm kind of everywhere, and I carry kind of my whole office sort of stuff in my bag. So I've been constantly keeping my eye open for another sort of book bag / briefcase. And I finally came across one. I was in the Superfluity store here in town. Love that store. And I go to the section where I know the bags are, because I've been keeping my eye open. And I see this great bag. And it's like brand new. It's still got the wrapper and the tags and the cover on the handle and everything. It's brand new. And it looks just like what I need. It's big enough. It's got the space for everything. It's laid out really nice. It's like, oh, this is great. I look at it. It's $10. And I'm going, this is going to be awesome. This will serve me really well for probably a long time, because it looks pretty well made. I'm looking at the tags. It says it's like all genuine leather. It's like, wow, this is going to be great. Functionally wise, this is going to serve me well. Great deal. Very nice. So I buy it. I take the thing home. I'm looking at the brand name on it, which I didn't really know anything about. It's a Bugatti. Meant nothing to me. A Bugatti. So I thought, I'm going to look it up just to see. I look it up and find that it's actually a fairly prestigious bag. And it's like, wow, this thing actually costs a lot of money. I got it for $10. And suddenly I started to feel all that much better about my purchase. And I'm not exactly sure why. And you know what I also realized over the first few weeks that I'm using this bag, I'm starting to get comments from absolute strangers about my bag. Like people I've never seen before, they're going, ooh, nice bag. Ooh, a Bugatti. It's like, and I'm feeling now that much better about my purchase. And oddly enough, a little bit better about myself too, for some strange reason. And then I take it to Starbucks one day, and there's a Starbucks that I often hang out at in the morning especially, and there's other people that hang out there as well. And there's this one guy who hangs out there that drives this absolutely gorgeous, brand new Jaguar. It's like, the thing can't be more than a few months old, Jaguar. He's never talked to me. Never said a word to me. I come in with my Bugatti bag, and he's chatting me up like crazy, wanting to talk to me about my bag, and he's probably wondering in the back of his mind, I wonder how this guy went from that ratty old, like, rawhide book bag to the Bugatti. He knows what model it is and everything. He goes, that's the executive attaché. It's like, really? Wow. And I'm feeling like I'm kind of now on the in crowd here. The guy who only talks to a very few people here is talking to me, you know? And it's interesting how that worked. And, you know, I realized, especially as I'm working my way through this passage this week, that I've got to be careful about stuff like that, that I don't allow that to make me feel better about myself. That's really important. And you know why? Because the truth is that having a Bugatti attaché case, it does not make me any better of a person whatsoever. Whatsoever. It doesn't make me any more successful of a person whatsoever. It doesn't make me any more acceptable or superior of a person at all. And if there's any sense that some of that's true, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's all false illusion. It's what the brand makers of our world want us to feel. It's the smoke and mirrors that they are creating to sell more product to more desperate people so that they can have that illusion of those feelings. But it's not for real. It's fake, it's artificial. It is the proverbial chasing after the wind that Solomon speaks of. It's meaningless, meaningless. All that kind of stuff is meaningless. And I guess that Solomon is especially recognizing that kind of a pursuit is meaningless. That toiling for that kind of stuff is meaningless, especially when one acknowledges how much suffering, injustice, hurt, and hopelessness there is in our world. And how that stuff's just not the answer to any of it. It's not. It does not scratch us where we itch. It does not meet those kinds of desperate needs of people. It's not the answer, it's not the solution. You cannot solve those kinds of problems by buying for those people who are suffering injustices, hurting, or whatever. Buy them brand name jeans and go, there you go, that should fix things for you. That should make you feel better and better about yourself. Now everything's going to be okay. No, it's not. No, it absolutely is not. You'll not be a more significant of a person. There won't be more meaning in your life because of that. You know what? As I began to think about it, I began to realize that the person who really truly is doing something significant, the person who really is toiling for something that is meaningful, is the person who is really addressing in the lives of other people the pains, the brokenness, the injustice, and the suffering in our world. That's meaningful work. That's meaningful toil. That person is a hero. And that's why, out of all the Christian leaders that I have observed, like around the world publicly in my entire lifetime, the one that has been truly, universally more admired than any of them is without a doubt who? Mother Teresa. Not some televangelist. So much the opposite. Mother Teresa, who spent her life with those people, living beside them, even living to large degrees like them. That's the person who's the true hero, who truly is. Her toil has not been meaningless under the sun. It has not been a chasing after the wind. That's also why out of all the Christian denominations / churches out there, the one that I have found to most consistently win the respect of those outside of the church, of the world, and I've heard this so many times. People in conversation find out who I am, what I do, go, I'm not really much for the church, never really cared, never really bought into what they do and who they are and what they claim. And then there's often I hear this, except for, guess who? The Salvation Army. Except for the Salvation Army. I respect what they do. I've heard that several times. And that's also why here in the Lower Mainland, in the Greater Vancouver area, the ministry that I hear praised on secular radio more than any other is the Union Gospel Mission. Multiple times I've heard them on talk shows spoken of in glowing terms by just the world out there. And that's why I think also the single most significant thing that has granted us, Uptown Church, within our community, a level of credibility has been what? The Christmas dinner that we do. And I thought of that one too. We don't do it anymore. We used to do the Safe Ride Home until sort of the services of that weren't really needed or required as much in our community anymore. Just because our community's kind of they've gotten it that you don't drink and drive. We used to drive like 700 people on Christmas Eve home, most of them minors. Pardon me? New Year's. Yeah, not Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve. Most of them minors. And I literally got letters sent to me, and even on a few occasions, money left at my door the next day saying, thank you for doing this, anonymous envelope of thanks, or even cash in it, thanking us for what we did. And the Christmas dinner as well. I mean, that is the thing that people see in our community, and they value it. They value it. It means something to them. And that's why I think also, well, it's funny. So thinking about all of this, it's also funny to me that even though our culture doesn't really live by those values, it's not like that's what they're chasing after. They're more driven by the whole, smoke and mirrors thing of what you should have and try to win the approval of others. And if you can do that, you're doing well. And it's all smoke and mirrors. And yet, when they look at things like a ministry, when they look at things like a church, the truth is they do think we should be doing that. They do believe and understand that that should be our values. And they're right. They're right. Those should be the things the community understands. Those should be the things that motivate us as the church and our actions. They know it. They know it. And that we shouldn't, of all places, the church shouldn't be wrapped up in impressing others and being socially accepted in the world, winning the approval of others. And I think along with that comes a little bit of a testimonial that they probably also realize that maybe should be true in their own lives too. The dominoes don't always fall like that. The other shoe doesn't always drop for them, but they do know the church should be, and they do admire that when the church does. The truth is, we all should. That's actually what we were built for, what we were designed to do and find fulfillment in doing, and real purpose and real value in what we do. Stuff like that. Now, so that's just a little intro to the first part of this chapter. Now let's start to move into the second part of it, and then I'm going to try to blend the two together a little bit. As we get into verse 9, Solomon does start to address the needs that we crave, because that's what he's doing. He's saying the world too often under the sun here chases after these things because they crave something and it just doesn't satisfy. Approval of others, right, does not satisfy. Driven by jealousy does not satisfy. It's not working. It's not what we really crave. In verse 9, he kind of hits on what we really do crave. That's what he's doing. Here he tells us what we really do crave. And the truth is that we do need community. We do need others, and to be accepted by and accepting of others around us in the form of a good and healthy community. But not by impressing them, not by just jealousy one to another and trying to outdo each other. Not that at all. What we need is real and honest community with others. Not that we should pursue acceptance by others and do whatever it takes to get it, but rather that we should all practice acceptance of others without condition. Just because they are human beings created by God, they should be acceptable and valued one to another. And that's the core and the basis for honest community amongst people. And honest work and toil as communities and as individuals here on earth. So Solomon writes these famous words in verse 9 to the end of this passage here. Famous words as a sort of praise / poem of the benefit of relationship and community. Real, authentic, genuine relationship and community. Especially, I think, as a faith community. Because when he gets to that third strand that does not allow the fellowship to be easily broken, there's a real strong indication that he's pointing to God there too. So that this authentic community, it works between ourselves and others and God as sort of the third fabric, the third thread of that cord that is not easily broken. So let's just walk through that passage quickly, because he talks about some of the benefits of life together, right? He talks about some of the benefits of community, that kind of community together. And the first thing he says is that two are better than one. They get a better return for their work, for their toil, right? We're stronger together is what he says. We can accomplish more. We can do more together. And if there's one area in life where I see people often reaching out for help, and when do you get a phone call from someone saying, could you help me, what? Move, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. We're moving, and oh my goodness, it is such an overwhelming job. We can't do it by ourselves. Can you help? Can you help? In fact, a couple of weeks ago, that was almost bad. A couple of weeks ago, man, turn the tape off. A couple of weeks ago, Abby moved. Abby and Alex moved, and out went the call for help. Help! We need help. We're moving. And Abby's, at least the email I got from her, she's even tempting us to come and help her with pizza and beer. I'll give you pizza and beer if you come and help. This is too much for us to do. We can't do it alone. And it pulls us together, and we help. And I dread the day we move. I mean, we're coming on to 25 years in one house, and it's like you store so much stuff. It's insane. When we're going to need an army of help when we finally move. You're going to have to root us out of that place, and probably there's going to be as many trips to our new place as there is going to be to the dump. Right? You realize that's what happens. That's when that's going to happen, and it's not just physical things with which we need help. Right? I mean, have you ever tried to heal by yourself? To heal a wound or a hurt by yourself? Now, obviously, I'm not talking about a physical wound, because those do tend to heal by themselves. You cut yourself and you get sewed together and it kind of heals itself. I'm talking about the deep, broken places of our lives. I don't know that you can heal those things by yourself. I'm thinking of the dysfunctions, the fears, and the anxieties, if you will, sort of the demons that haunt us kind of stuff. I think we always need assistance in healing that kind of stuff. And God bless those who come alongside in love and help and care, and they listen, and more than listen, here's what I see them do is like they sit with us through sort of that dark night of the soul sort of stuff. I think there are points in time when we all need that. And we need someone to sit with us through that. And how about those who help us with things like our blind spots? Right? Because I think we all have them, right? And you know, the real problem with a blind spot is that it's blind. You know, you're blind to it. You can't see it. And that's why you need someone else to help you with it. Because they can provide a different perspective. They can see from another angle, from outside of you or inside your own head kind of thing. And how important that is to have people like that as part of our community and relationships as authentic as that in our lives. And how we can protect each other from not only from pain and from faltering and falling and stumbling. If we have people like that who can help us, come alongside of us and back us up and help us, who will be bold enough to do things like say and ask, are you okay? Do you see what's happening? You know, in a loving and concerned sort of way, can you see that? Can you see what's happening? I'm concerned for you. Do you want to talk about it? That kind of thing. And I think we all need to do that. I think we all have our blind spots, and we all have also the ability to help lovingly other people see their blind spots. It's not like a certain select group of people are the blind spot viewers, and others, you know, they have to listen to these people. We have to do this for each other. This is the very thing that goes both ways. And we can help each other up when we stumble them too. Then we can do that part as well. There's some of the benefits. He talks about keeping warm as well. And this whole idea about how two can keep warm together. And I mean, I know it's the middle of the summer. We're like heading into probably our hottest, heat spell of the whole year this coming week. But think about when it's cold. When does it get cold? In the winter. Yeah, winter. Think about just the whole metaphor of how we often use winter. Right? Winter. It's a time of hibernation and things going dormant and shutting down because of the cold. It's often dark, right? And you can associate winter with just darkness, and very often with even emotional senses like depression, cold, and even metaphorically, we often talk about death in terms of winter coming in the whole phases of life, right? Those dark, cold, deteriorating days. And we all head into winters throughout our lives, metaphorically. And man, does it help to be together, to have people that we can be together with in the midst of that kind of stuff. It keeps us warm in the midst of what otherwise would be very, very cold. Right? And when the cold of winter comes for you, in whatever personal way it does, oh man, what a blessing it is to be a part of community that can draw together with you and help keep you warm through it. That's a blessing. In life, in community, we're called. We're called to be that for each other, to help, to watch, to comfort, and then also to enjoy life together. All of those things. That's what the church is called to in its community. And you know, sometimes it happens. And sometimes it doesn't happen so much. Sometimes it happens for some, and sometimes not so much for others. So I want us to think a little bit about this. So I'm going to start just by suggesting to you from the previous verses that we read, the tough verses there, some things that kill community. Some things that damage and destroy community. Right? And the first one, and we already we did touch on it already, is envy. Envy kills community, doesn't it? Right? I mean, obviously, envy kills community. Because you know what you do when you envy? It's bizarre. When you're wrapped up in the midst of envy, you end up doing things like celebrating someone else's failures. Even if you might do it quietly in your own head. You know, sinking and finding just a little bit of joy or satisfaction in the fact that someone else's ship is sinking so yours can appear to float higher. Jealousy causes that, and that kills community. And on the converse side, it makes you feel threatened by someone else's successes or blessings. How can you have community if that's what's happening? You can't. You just can't. Jealousy will always derail your chances of close, intimate relationship and community with others. And if there is any kind of a root of jealousy in anyone's heart, in my heart, in your heart, man, we have to pray against that. Because it will just destroy us and horribly inhibit community. The next thing that he points out is laziness. Just touches on that, this idea of laziness. You know, talking about how the fool folds his hands and kind of gives up. You know, laziness or apathy, giving up. And here I think is just a little nugget of truth in that, is that intimacy, that kind of community requires work. It requires time and effort. You're not going to get and be a part of intimacy within a group of people without putting something into it, without investing into it. Time and effort are what you have to invest. Time and effort. Authentic community, there is no substitute for time and effort in authentic community. It's something we got to sometimes fight for, even. Wrestle for. And those who become apathetic or lazy in that respect will never experience intimacy, and here's why. It's because they won't be able to, because they're too busy usually consuming from others and end up then being consumed by even themselves, devoured by themselves, is sort of what Solomon says. Instead of thinking about investing and pouring and giving into others, they're sucking. They're sucking everything from everyone around them that they can possibly get. They want to receive. Pump into me all the time. And that doesn't work. I think you've got to approach community with the idea that I'm going to give all the time. And in that, you receive. If we don't, we'll just wear everybody else out. And then in the end, just wear ourselves out. It's like consume ourselves. If we want authentic relationship and community, we've got to work for it. We've got to put energy into it. We've got to make room for it. Primary room for it. Not secondary room. Not sort of leftover time in my life that I can't seem to fill. But actually make a primary space for it. That's how those kinds of relationships come into being. It doesn't just happen without the effort or the investment. The other thing that he notes really quickly that kills community, just sort of really briefly mentions it, is this idea of dissatisfaction. Just a spirit, a heart of just dissatisfaction can kill genuine community really quickly. Because you see, if you are dissatisfied, if there's just this sense, this feeling of just dissatisfaction, I'm just not satisfied with what is, what are you doing? You're going to immediately start looking to the future. If you're dissatisfied with the now, you're going to always be gazing into the future, gazing into the future. You know what? You cannot experience community and relationship in the future. You can only experience it in the now. Only, ever in the now. And if you're constantly stuck in sort of a spirit of dissatisfaction, you're going to constantly be looking into the future for it and waiting for someday it'll come, and it'll never come. Or you're going to start looking somewhere else. It's not going to happen here. These people are lame, whatever. Go somewhere else. It's always going to be somewhere else, somewhere else. Some other time, somewhere else. Some other time, somewhere else. That's the problem with that sense of dissatisfaction. Is you're never going to catch up with it. You're never going to catch up with it. It'll always be tomorrow. It'll always be in the future. And it'll always be somewhere else. It'll always be someone else's fault. And you'll chase after it forever and never actually catch it. So I think there's a sense that in order to experience community, you've got to slow down as well. You've got to slow down, and I think you've even got to settle down with the people whom you are among, with the people whom God has put you among. Settle down with them and invest in them with your time and your effort. And the last thing that I want to point out that can kill community is this, again, this whole idea of working for the wrong thing. Work spent in the wrong way. We've talked about it already, but let me just add this one thought to it. I was intrigued this week. So I want to just raise this whole idea of, can you find satisfaction, i.e. happiness, with money? And there's all kinds of studies out there that say kind of, maybe, maybe not. Because it's a really tricky question. It's a really tricky question. And so often the issue is not the money that we have or don't have, but rather it's how we spend it, right? That's the key point, is how we invest that money. So I was drawn to a study that I read this week in the Wall Street Journal by a lady named Elizabeth Dunn, who is a social psychologist, and she did this really interesting study. She gave a whole bunch of people fairly large sums of money. Half of them, she said, you have one day to spend this money on yourself. And the other half, she said, you have one day to spend this money on other people. And then she intensely interviewed them at the end, and guess what happened? The people who had to spend the money on someone else they found far more joy and happiness in doing that than they did in spending the money on themselves. It's not really a matter of whether or not you have money. It's what that money is to you and how you spend it and what you see as being worth spending your money on. And hoarding it and just buying things for yourself is really not very worth it in terms of satisfaction and personal growth. Spending it and investing it on relationship and others, man, that tickles us right where we need to be. It touches us where we need to be. It scratches our itch. It does that. That gets into us. That is well spent money. In fact, I would even argue that's probably the primary thing you should spend your money on if you have discretionary money. I mean, you need food and shelter and stuff too, but if you've got extra money, man, there's the thing that'll make you happy and just make this world a better place and address some of the core issues of what we all need in life, right? Those things work. Those things work. So, those are my highlights of the passage. Now what? Okay, good. Just enough time to sort of conclude this. Now what? Now what do we do with this? So we're a church. We're a community. I mean, we're the perfect place to apply this, right here with us. So it was interesting to me to sort of be working through this passage this week and then to have the weekend that I had. Because I had a weekend just packed with community with people from this church. So the wedding yesterday, beautiful, amazing, wonderful community event. Oh my goodness, and many of the people of our church are a part of it, and family of our church is at the core of it. It was wonderful. It was full. My heart was full. And then on Friday night, we had the rehearsal, which was all right too. It was quick. But then after that, I went out to the Legion. To the Legion. I'd never been to the Legion. It was my first trip to the Legion with like 5 couples from this church. It was like the 50s club in our church. And we all went to the Legion. And it's like, it was amazing. It was, you know, it's just the Legion. But it was wonderful to spend that evening together. We went there because Janine has the kitchen there, and she does her cooking out of there, and she provides the food for just that one evening. We all wanted to support her, so we go there, we support her, we eat her awesome cooking, we sit around a table together. There's a band playing and dancing, and it's like, you know what? I mean, we're at the Legion, so it's like we're the youngest people there. We're the kids again. It's like we're the little rowdy teenagers all over again. It was wonderful. And I think, Barb, you had a hard time getting in, but they must have been carding you or something. You were probably the youngest person in the building. It was incredible. And it was just a really joyful, enjoyable slice of community together. I loved it. And as I'm working through this passage all week and these events of the weekend, my mind keeps coming round to this idea of how can we get more of that? How can we provide within this community of people more of that? Right? Does that make sense? That seems like a good application for this, right? And I'm thinking, you know, when it comes to community, some people have a little bit of an advantage, especially those who tend to be like extroverts. They dive into things socially quickly and easily because they so crave it and need it. The introverts, it can be harder, right? I mean, and the truth is, I always, when I do those personality testing things, I'm an introvert. And every time they come to the question of, if you had an afternoon free, what would you rather do? And there's everything from, go find a bunch of friends to hang out at the beach with and, sort of rally them and get them all to go, to sit down and read a book by yourself. I'm always the guy who sits down and reads a book by himself. That's always my choice. It's like, for me, the big social experience is kind of, it's energy expended. I need to do it, and it's a part of what I need too, but it's energy expended. And if I'm alone reading my book, it's energy gained. It's putting energy into me. And that's how sort of the introvert and the extrovert sort of work. So for the extrovert, the community can come a bit easier for sure. They'll dive into things much more readily. For the extrovert, it's harder. And we've got everything. Right? You get a group like this, you've got everything. From extrovert to introvert to everything in between as well. And what do we do? How do we do that? Easy for some people, harder for other people. For some people, it feels a little bit draining, even a little bit risky. Especially if you've been hurt a few times, it becomes really risky. And yet that's part of the reality amongst a group of people like this. How do we move forward with all of that together? It's on my heart, and we need to do more of that. It's not because the church and the gospel is just about social interaction, but it's part of it. It's caring for each other in physical terms and in emotional terms. It's part of it. And I think part of why we do that, and the gospel calls us to do that part of it too, is so that we can gain closeness, intimacy, and credibility with each other to help lead each other and the community abroad into some of the deeper and deeper spiritual needs that we have too, so that we can start to include that stuff as well, which is more the core of the gospel. But the gospel covers both of them. We've got to do that for each other. So I have a suggestion for you. Next week, we celebrate communion, right? And you might remember a few years ago, for 1 year, we did this thing. So we do Communion Sunday once a month, first Sunday of the month. It's just been our habit, practice, whatever. And, it's communion, right? We call it communion. You see the association there with community, communion? It's real obvious, actually. And I thought, how can we make this more community in the midst of our communion? So what we did for a whole year, how many of you remember? Anybody remember? Yeah, for 1 year, I encouraged every time we did communion, before our service was over, we'll celebrate communion together. Then, before you leave, go and find someone. We pray about it, and is there someone here whom God is leading you to say, hey, let's get together sometime for coffee, for lunch, for whatever within the next month. And we'd use that Communion Sunday in the conclusion of communion to encourage each other to go and do that. Get your appointment books out and go and find someone and make an appointment with them. Maybe it's someone you've been saying, I got to get together with so-and-so, and you know how time goes and you just don't do it. To be more proactive with that. Or maybe God is actually tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you know that person who kind of doesn't seem like they have a lot of connection here. Go to them and invite them and talk to them and make an appointment with them. Whatever God is leading you to. So it seemed to me, in light of all of this, it'd be a good time to reinstitute that. Maybe for a year again. So next week, how about we start that? Next week, we're going to do communion, and at the end of communion, I'm just doing this to give you a heads up. I don't want to spring anything on you without you having some opportunity to have a heads up. And if this really freaks you out, you can just avoid coming next week, I guess. But we're going to do that. So that'll be part of the communion service next week. Here's the other thing I thought. So a second thing, again, next week, I'm again giving you some heads up. It's a holiday weekend next week, right? Which, I mean, there's not been a lot of people Sunday to Sunday here during the summer, but next week it'll probably even be less because a lot of people will probably be gone. But for those who are here, you know what? I think it's like the perfect opportunity to next week after church plan to have a barbecue together. How's that? So whoever comes, come. I will go to Costco and get a bunch of the hot dog packages. Like, they're really inexpensive. And if you didn't bring anything, so what? You can at least have a hot dog, right? I'll provide the hot dog. Or maybe we can coordinate so some people bring other stuff too. And we can provide more. But we'll do a little bit of a sign-up thing. I'll get some help with that, with whoever can help me with that. And we'll sort of advertise this through the week. And next week after church, we'll do communion. We'll invite people for lunch or coffee or some sort of a get-together sometime during the month. And then after church, we'll do a barbecue together. We'll go somewhere. We'll announce it, this week. I don't know where yet, because I don't make those decisions. Because we'd end up probably going to my house, and then I'd have to deal with Kim on that. So someone else can make the decision, and then we'll have a barbecue, and we'll just share time together. And those are just two really simple steps that we could do. How's that sound? Just to get started on it. There's one other thing I was thinking too, is I don't know how many of you like to go to movies, or even what kind of movies you like, but man, I really want to see the movie Dunkirk. Hey, see, there's a few people who want to join me. What do you think? We get a group of us together to go see the movie Dunkirk? You're all invited. Whoever wants to come. If you want to come, boy, I'm going to get a piece of paper at the back of the table there. Ken, can we rustle up a piece of paper back there with a pen? And whoever wants to go see Dunkirk sometime in the next 10 to 12 days, write your name there, phone number, or whatever, email address if that's the way you roll, and I'll contact you. We'll pick a date, and whoever can make it, we'll go see Dunkirk together. Dave, you in? You've seen it yet? You lived it, I know, yeah. So yeah, and you've seen it? You in? No, are you in to go? All right, sorry, so we got Cheap Tuesday, there you go. We got 3 of us already, so. Yeah, that's farther away. That sounds like work, Dave. So that's where we're going to start. That's where we're going to start. And I just feel very much a fresh urgency to lean into community here amongst us, good community, the kind of community God calls us to strengthen each other personally, to support each other physically and emotionally, and to just have that credibility to share gospel, love, and truth with each other. And I want to do this more broadly amongst our community too. And I'm going to make an announcement probably, hopefully next week as to how I think maybe we can do that as well. An opportunity for us to step into, those who might be compelled to. All right, so stay tuned for that for next week. Good? Can I pray? Okay, God, I thank you for this group of people. Lord, I look out among this audience and I'm always overwhelmed by just the broad, incredible cross-section demographically that we have here. It's beautiful. It is so much like a family, and I love it. And I love this community of people, and I pray your blessing upon us, and I pray, God, that you would lend us your Spirit and the power of your Spirit to be all that you call us to be. Because I know you don't call us to be anything we can't be, to be something that we can't be. You're going to help us. You only call us into things that you're also going to help us to accomplish. So God, help us not to just lean on our own strength to do this, but to truly see this as a spiritual exercise too, something that is beyond just our ability to pull off. And trust in you to see it happen amongst us. Trust you to see it happen amongst us in powerful ways that truly meet our personal needs. All of our personal needs. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. God bless you.